One day, while wandering around near Wilhelm's Wharf, we see a rusting tunnel off to the northwest. Hopping down into the water and creeping closer to explore, we discover that it's a sewer grate to the Hubris Comics utility tunnels. Hubris Comics? That sounds interesting. Heading inside, we find ourselves in a sewer tunnel with piles of toxic, radioactive waste barrels at the very end. These barrels are blocking off a path to the west, so to continue, we have to open a door to the south. This puts us out on top of a staircase. Turning east to go down some stairs, we round a corner to find...
Over here! What's the matter, huh?
3 ghouls in this utility room. While looting the corpses, we find a desk to the southeast, and on the desk, a copy of Dean's Electronics. We can walk away with other minor scrap, but to continue, we need to go down a hallway to the south. This rounds a corner to the east, and we arrive at a T-junction. Do we go down the stairs to the south, or continue to the east? We'll go east for now. This path rounds a corner to the north and opens into a room filled with pipes and big machines. This room is empty, save for a skeleton against the northern wall. The skeleton is slumped over next to a console, and on the ground between his legs is an assault rifle with 3 clips of 5.56mm ammunition. We also find some caps scattered around here and 2 first aid kits. But this is a dead end, so to continue, we need to turn around, go back to the hallway, and this time take the staircase down into the south. But this leads us to a split. We can go in 4 directions. At that time, however, some ghouls back up where we came from decided to attack. With the ghoul Reaver dead, we can head back down the stairs. We could go up to the east or down to the west. Moving south, we see that this is a dead end. All right, well, that makes it a little simpler. We'll start by going down to the west. This path rounds a corner smack dab into...
Where?
Love that alien tech. There's a turret in here, but it doesn't appear to be active. Creeping inside, we find the turret control terminal on the wall. After hacking it, we can activate the turret system, but in my haste I accidentally reconfigured its targeting parameters. Sure enough, backing out, the turret attacks the ghouls, but then it attacks us as well.
That's the end of that. Hey!
With the ghouls dead in this room, we can loot up and explore. We see some shelves in the middle of this room with some boxes piled nearby. We also see a chain link fence, and on the other side, a corpse next to some ammo crates. We need to find a way over there. The chain link fence wraps all the way to the west, but we do find a path to go around it. Here we find a stepladder next to a red toolbox, and going around these big metal generator things, we find the skeleton and the ammo canisters leaning on the other side. Moving south and away from the fenced-off area, we find some shelves with boxes and minor scrap. Of note here, we find 2 first aid kits, one locked with a very easy lock, but the other is not locked. After checking the filing cabinets for ammunition, we can continue by going through a doorway to the south.
This place sucks.
This leads up a staircase and ends at a door to Hubris Comics Publishing. Alright, so we found Hubris Comics, but before we go through the door, I want to finish exploring this utility tunnel, so retracing our steps all the way back to that 4-way junction, we can this time go up the stairs to the east. This leads to a small room with a few dead ends, but our path continues by going out a doorway to the north. This leads to a hallway going east filled with flammable gas, but it splits with another path going down into the south. And at the bottom of the southern stairs, we find another ghoul. Rounding the corner, Heading inside, we can loot the bodies, but this just goes in a big loop. It heads up some stairs to the north, right back to that hallway filled with flammable gas. So to continue, we can follow the hallway to the east, which turns a corner to the north, ending at yet another doorway to Hubris Comics Publishing. Well, we've explored the utility tunnels and we find 2 doors to Hubris Comics Publishing. Since we're here, let's go ahead and go through this one. We find ourselves at the bottom of a staircase. Heading up the stairs and opening the door at the top, we enter a darkened hallway. We hear the sound of ghouls moving about, but creeping around the corner, we don't see anything. But wait, through a doorway, we see a collapsed floor. And on the ground floor, there we go. That should clear him out. Well, we could follow this hallway to the south, but first, let's head west into this destroyed room. We find ourselves on the top floor of a 2-story workplace, and this top floor must have been a sweatshop for writers. We find dozens of tables covered in typewriters. It's amazing how much writing was still not digitized even in 2077. You'd think these would all be computers. But despite inspecting every desk, we don't find anything. They're all empty. Thanks, Scrounger. Now we could hop down to this room below, but first, I want to explore this top floor. We see 3 doors, 2 exits to the west, and 1 door to a hallway to the south. We'll start by heading out either of the exit doors to the west. These both lead to a hallway going south and north. Heading north for now, we round a corner to find a pitching machine trap. We see a tripwire strung across the hallway. We can snip it for the experience, and heading down the hallway, we find no fewer than 3 pitching machines set up. Ooh, this would have been painful. We can disarm each of them for more experience. Here, the hallway opens up into a room to the south. Moving south into the room, we see a bunch of shelves covered in books. Sadly, these are all small ruined books. We see that half of this room has been blocked up with furniture. Desks, bookcases, filing cabinets, even tires block these openings. I wonder what's on the other side, but we can't get there from here. So, continuing to explore the perimeter, sadly we don't find any pre-war books on any of these shelves, and this room ends at an elevator to the north. This elevator leads to Hubris Comics Printing. I don't want to go there yet. First, let's finish exploring this floor. To do so, we've got to retrace our steps, past the pitching machines, and back down the hallway. Here we can stop and admire the huge Adventures of Captain Cosmo's TV banner. I want one for my office. But here we can continue down the hallway to the south. This rounds a corner, past the writer's sweatshop to the northeast, and continues to the south. Here we find a hallway to the west. We'll bypass this for now, but let's remember it. It'll become important later. And instead we'll move to the southwest where we find a room labeled Beta Testing. Beta Testing? I thought this was a comic publisher. Before we head into the beta testing room, we find a refreshment nook with an Edotronic. Here we can walk away with a stim pack. We can loot some Nuka-Cola from the Nuka-Cola machine. Heading into the beta testing room, we find a bunch of cubicles with L-shaped desks. And here, Scrounger finally began to pay off. I started to get all sorts of caps and ammunition from the desks. The middle of this floor is caved into the room below. We could hop down that way, or take this handy staircase leading down to the northwest. But at the end of the stairs, we see another tripwire. We can disarm it, but wait a minute, what was this tripwire connected to? Ah, there it is. It was connected to a fragmentation grenade bouquet. We can disarm this for the experience, then head back down to continue exploring. Here we find more cubicles with more L-shaped desks, all of which have computers that are broken except for one in a cubicle to the north. This desk is covered in a bunch of toy cars, and the computer is labeled The Reign of Grelok Beta. Reign of Grelok Beta version 0.632. And immediately we realize that this is one of those text-based RPGs. We arrive at a plane. We can look around, We are standing in a wide plain. Foothills stretch to the north, where clouds gather around an ominous peak. A dirt path winds from a lonely chapel to the east, through the plains where we are standing, and south into a bustling town. Wispy mists gather over marshlands in the west, where a thin tower stands alone in a bog. Okay, mountain to the north, town to the south, chapel to the east, tower to the west. Well, before we decide which way to go, we can inspect our inventory. Our only weapon is a rusty sword. Your weapon, rusty but trusty. But we also have a drinking flask, a very small flask to carry water. But we can't do anything with these yet. Well, let's start by heading north towards the mountain. Mountainside. Grelok is here spewing heresies. Let's look around. We are on the craggy, wind-blasted face of a mountain. Storm clouds coil above the summit, pelting us and the sparse vegetation with torrential downpour. Far below, beyond the foothills, a wide plain stretches across the southern horizon. Grelok is here spewing heresies. A glint between the rocks catches our eye. Well, let's start by investigating the glinting object, and we find a rough gemstone, which we can take from the rocks. Inspecting it in our inventory, we see that it's a raw gemstone, but despite this, we learn that it may be valuable. The only other option we have at this point is to attack Grelok with our rusty sword, but our puny weapons are useless on Grelok. So, with no other options, we have to retreat back to the south. We arrive again at the plains. This time let's go east towards the chapel. When we arrive, we can examine the chapel. We stand at the end of a dirt path facing a small chapel. The stucco walls are faded. Many roof tiles are missing. The great oaken doors are locked. The congregation is nowhere to be found. A small cemetery of crooked headstones lies in the shadow of the cracked steeple. The dirt path winds westward through a great featureless plain. A zombie totters aimlessly nearby. There is an open grave nearby. We'll start by examining the grave. There is a deep, empty grave in the cemetery. Several bloated rats float in a foot of filthy water at the bottom. Don't fall in. Instead of leaping into the grave, we can attack the zombie with our rusty sword. Our blow knocks the zombie into the grave. Well, now that we've got the zombie in the grave, we can examine the grave again. And this time, we find that a grotesque zombie head is stuck on a root near the top of the grave. We bag the horrific trophy as proof of our deed. We just bagged a zombie head? Checking it out in our inventory. Sure enough, here it is. The smell may make us unpopular. Oh, great. Well, with the zombie head in tow, we can head back to the plains. Next, we'll try heading south towards the town. Once there, we can look around. We're standing in a dusty market square of a quiet town. Many of the shops and homes lie abandoned, and the citizens that can be seen speak in hushed voices, casting furtive glances at the darkened skyline in the distant north. The ringing of an anvil breaks the silence regularly, where a mustachioed blacksmith bends over his work in a nearby tent. The blacksmith is here working. A priest is here drinking. We can start by talking with the priest. The priest drunkenly curses the undead who have defiled his church. We present him with the decapitated zombie head from our bag. "Praise you," he hiccups. "Perhaps Grelok's influence isn't so strong." With that, he turns his decanter over on the head and tosses it into a fireplace, where it bursts into purple flame and burns up almost instantly. "I must gather the faithful," he says. He presses a brass key into our palm. "Please, help yourself to what little may be of use at my chapel." All right, we've got a key to the church. Before we head back that way, we can talk with the blacksmith. Our eyes water from the smoke and smarmy heat inside the tent. Smarmy? I don't think they meant to use that word. The huge man swipes sweat from his bald head and looks up from his work. "There's no shortage of work to be done with Grelok scaring everyone witless," he says. "Leave me to filling my orders, stranger." With that, the blacksmith dismisses you from his tent and douses a hot blade in the water, hissing with steam. So it looks like the blacksmith doesn't have anything for us now. Leaving the town and heading back to the plains, we can head east back to the chapel. Now that we have the key, we can unlock the front door to the chapel, and after unlocking it, we can head inside. Dust motes hang lazily in the shafts of colored light stretching across the chapel from peaked windows. The pews, pulpit, and everything else are covered in a fine mist. There is a very deep stone cistern near the entrance. It is full to the brim with blessed water. There is more than enough water here to fill our tiny flask. After filling our flask with water, we can examine it in our inventory. Our flask is full of blessed water. Well, we're not quite sure what to do with this water yet, but I'm sure it's important. Heading out of the chapel and returning to the plains, we can now head west towards the tower. We arrive in the swamp, and we can look around. We are standing on a narrow stone path in a dark marsh. Greasy bubbles float to the top of the bog water on either side and pop lazily, spattering our legs with muck and slime. A short stone tower squats here. No door is visible, and the stones are smooth and polished. A balcony juts out midway up the tower's face. The heady smells of incense mix with the nauseating stench of the swamp. The stone path unfurls eastward towards a broad plain beyond the marshes. A wizard is here, gesticulating wildly from his balcony. We can try talking to the wizard, and he says, "Hoo-hoo! The Slayer of Grelok approaches, raw stone in hand, just as I've seen." The wizard's pointy hat bobs excitedly as he points a finger at us. Suddenly, a pale orange arc of light extends from the knobby finger and draws the gemstone from our bag before we can react. The gemstone halts and hovers in the air before the wizard's nose. "Essence be true, powers renew, fatty hoodoo!" With that, he slaps the hovering stone, smashing it against the smooth stone of the tower. In a burst of light, the stone splits into two, and one half lands in each outstretched palm of the hopping little wizard. "Shard for the sword, wrap her in iron, and she'll find Grelok's black heart for you. Take the chaff too. You'll need payment for a smith to forge the weapon." He tosses the stones down, which you leap forward to catch safely. Well, that was dramatic. Inspecting our inventory, we find 2 items. The raw gemstone is now a refined gemstone, a brilliant, faceted gemstone. And we have a magical shard. The gem shard pulses with magical light. And now we know exactly what to do. Leaving the swamp, heading back to the plains, we can turn south towards the town. Once we arrive, we can talk with the blacksmith. This time, the blacksmith regards us gruffly and is about to dismiss us when we produce the polished gemstone from our bag. He sets his hammer aside and twirls his mustache. "A right fine stone, that is," he says, admiring the faceted stone. "What would you be needing then?" he asks. Following our careful instructions, the smithy reforges our rusty sword with the magical shard at the center of the blade. When done, we can inspect our inventory, and now we have a magic sword, an enchanted weapon to defeat Grelok. Leaving the town, we return to the plains, and we can now head north back to the mountain. Once there, we can attack Grelok with our magical sword. When we draw the sword, Grelok lowers his great horned head and bellows laughter in our face. We grit our teeth and swing a mighty 2-handed blow, the magical blade ringing clearly, even amid the tumult of throaty cackling. We swing the sword so fiercely, it escapes our grip and hurtles into the open maw of the monstrosity, lost from sight in the arid darkness of Grelok's throat. We step back as Grelok jerks his mouth shut and stands upright. He is still for a moment, then starts clawing at his neck. Muffled, a ringing can be heard as if from a great distance. Suddenly, Grelok's chest bursts in a fount of viscous green blood. The ringing can be heard clearly now, and as thick lifeblood oozes around the protruding tip of the magic sword, the storm clouds swirling around the peak are already clearing. Grelok is defeated. The end. Thanks for playing. Backing out, we read, "Victory! Game over, thanks for playing." Well, that gave me a huge dose of nostalgia for games like that I played when I was a kid. Exploring this lower level, we can loot all of the desks down here, and as we move to the south, we see a bit of a storage area. But moving forward... Oh, I completely missed that tripwire. Run away! And and it appears that we've awoken something. Clover and Dogmeat head upstairs to investigate, and following them we find a feral ghoul Reaver. It must have spawned after we tripped the tripwire, because we completely cleared this place just a moment ago. Anyway, heading back downstairs, we can loot this storage room, where we find 3 ammo canisters and 3 first aid kits, one of which is locked. But we don't find a door down here, so this is effectively a dead end. To continue, we have to head back upstairs. Going back into the writer's sweatshop, we can leap down to this bottom floor. Down here we can loot the bodies of the ghouls we killed earlier. We see lots of bookshelves, but again, no pre-war books. All we find down here is a hallway to the south leading to the bathrooms. In the women's bathroom, we find a toilet, and what's that? Oh, devilish! Someone has rigged up microfusion cells to the toilet water, electrifying it. Shocking anyone who chooses to use the toilet. How devious. Heading into the men's restroom, we don't see a similar setup here, but that's it for down here. To leave, we have to go out a door to the east. We see stairs to the south and a supply closet to the north. Heading inside the supply closet, we just find a bunch of scrap, nothing interesting. So to continue, we turn around and go south up the stairs. This leads to the hallway, where we killed all the ghouls upon first arriving at Hubris Comics. It looks like the only path forward is to head back to that elevator. So heading through the writer's room and down the hallway past the pitching machines, we can turn around to the north and take the elevator to Hubris Comics Printing. On the other side, we step forward into a large room. We find feral ghouls and ceiling-mounted turrets already attacking them. And who's that? Uh-oh, he's gonna attack. Goodness, what was all that about? We see some sort of factory floor below us and some walkways moving above it. Heading south across the walkway, we find a platform in the middle of the room with a terminal hovering above it. Inspecting the terminal, we see that this is the Hubris Comics Publishing Printing Press terminal. Remember to make sure no one is near the press while operating. We see a number of options here. The first is to turn on the printing press. Backing out to see what happened. Uh-oh. Smoke. I see smoke. It's gonna blow. Hiding behind the wall, we can wait. No? No explosion? Okay. Just smoke. No fire. Creeping forward ever so cautiously. Yeah, we see the smoke pouring out of those printing presses down there, but looks like that's about it. Accessing the terminal again, we can check manuscript, and it looks like these presses were printing Grognak the Barbarian issue 361. Checking the ink levels, we learn that red ink is low. Checking paper stock, we see that it's loaded with low-grade pulp. But that's it for this terminal. Moving west, the walkway turns north. Uh-oh, landmines. Oh, no, dog meat. Oh, I'm not gonna have enough time. Ah, doggone it, dog meat. I'm guessing that whomever we killed in that operator's room over there laid down all of these traps. Perhaps he was trying to turn Hubris Comics into his own personal hideout, but kept getting overwhelmed by the ghouls. Well, we see a little bit of a walled-off nook to the southeast. Before heading downstairs, we can cross the room to the other side to see if we can get over there. Turning east, we find a staircase that goes downstairs, and then turns around to the west, and here we find more ghouls. With the ghouls dead, we can turn right and this path leads us to the other side of that walled-off nook. Here we find some filing cabinets and shelves covered in all sorts of scrap, and against the wall is the Hubris Comics Publishing Terminal. Hubris Comics Publishing, publishing quality prints at quality prices. We find air conditioning controls, but the system is inoperative, not surprising, 200 years later. From here we can unlock the Foreman door. I guess we'll bump into that in a minute. We can read the release schedule. Hubris Comics, Summer of 2077 schedule. A glorious summer for Hubris and America. In June, they were publishing Captain Cosmos, Truth, Justice, and the Space American Way. Kid Wacky's Zany Hijinks, Grognak the Barbarian, Revenge of the Mansaurian, and Tales from the Front, Alaska Unbowed. In July, they were publishing Grognak's Salute to the Troops, Tales from the Front, Liberated Canada, Captain Cosmos, Invasion of the Black Planet, and Drake Tungsten, Chrono Cowboy. And then in August, they were publishing Tales from the Front, The Red Terror, Underground Life, Vault Boy Special, Grognak the Barbarian, An Axe for All Ages, and Captain Cosmos, The Radioactive Spaceman from Space. I wish I could read all of these. Backing out of the release schedule, we can now read letters to the editor. Requiem for an Antagonist. Grognak the Barbarian is an excellent comic for many reasons, but one of the most widely respected ones is the depth of its villains. From the cold-blooded manipulations of the Mansaurian to the love-hate romance with Femra, the stories of Grognak's enemies are every bit as fascinating as his own tales. But for my money, no tale is more tragic and more fascinating than that of the antagonizer. While never developed as fully as major villains like Skullpocalypse or Mastodonald... oh no. The portrait of the orphaned girl raised by ants and instilled with a bitter hatred of humanity has tremendous potential for reader connection and possible redemption. However, in Grognak and the Ants of Agony, Mr. Neptura threw away all of that potential by simply treating the antagonizer as a two-dimensional villain with a futile and pointless grudge against mankind. His writing replaced her subtle undertones of lost humanity and tragically lost innocence with the worst sort of mustache-twirling cliched dialogue. It was an offense to a deep and tragic character. How a hack like that continues to find work in comics is beyond my comprehension. Hubris Comics should fire him and return the series to the capable hands of Mr. Morellis. Until that time, I refuse to buy another comic from what used to be my favorite publisher, Obsessed in Oakmont. In addition to being fascinating in its own right, this letter is important to read for a later quest, which we'll get to in an upcoming episode. The final option on this terminal is to read a press release. For immediate release, Hubris Comics and Vault-Tec Incorporated unveil Vault Boy Meets Hell's Chain Gang, limited 5-part miniseries. The very best in invincible entertainment and impenetrable vaults team up to bring comic fans a gripping grimoire of greatness. From their headquarters in Washington, D.C., Hubris Comics announced today plans to bring a beloved American icon into the Hubris Comics universe, none other than the beloved Vault Boy character. Vault Boy was the perfect choice for our new Hell's Chain Gang series, says Hubris Comics Chief of Publishing Peter Shiner, in which those valiant vigilantes take on Chairman Chang's Commie Cyborg Corps. After all, Vault Boy knows a thing or two about going up against that red menace. The 5-part miniseries will feature an alternate future in which Chinese communists have invaded America. Vault Boy and Hell's Chain Gang are the last best hope for America to break free from the shackles of communism in this cautionary tale of vigilance. It has always been Vault-Tec's mission to educate and protect our countrymen from the communist threat, commented Vault-Tec Public Relations Executive Joanne Strausser. This exciting project is a perfect opportunity to thrill young Americans while sending home an important message for us all. Every good American must help shoulder the burden of freedom and always be wary of the communist threat. The first issue of this miniseries will be available on newsstands everywhere this holiday season. About Hubris Comics. Hubris Comics, a branch of Hubris Publishing, headquartered in Washington, D.C., has been producing printed entertainment since 2021. Hubris Comics are known for such popular properties as Grelok the Barbarian, Hell's Chain Gang, and The Inspector. I want to know more about Hell's Chain Gang. What on earth? Vault Boy? Hell's Chain Gang? Alternate universe where the commies take over America? Now that's a series I could get into. Backing out of the publishing terminal, we can continue to loot this nook, and finally we find one pre-war book on this shelf. Here we can also loot a couple of first aid kits, one of which is locked, and aside from a bunch of scrap and a stack of fission batteries, that's about it for this nook. So heading out, we can turn west to continue exploring. We find a pathway to the north which leads to the factory floor, and we see that smoke still pouring out of these machines. Think I must have broken something. After looting the corpses, we can inspect these machines. We see conveyor belts leading in and out of them. Disturbingly, some of them have puddles of blood on them. What? We can loot a few boxes on some nearby shelves, and ooh, look at this! A human torso in one of these bins at the end of the conveyor belt. Does that mean he somehow got processed in a machine? Oh, look at that! Oh. Well, no wonder the machines are busted. This guy's clogging the machinery. We find another human torso stuck in this little hole. I moved around to all of the rest of the conveyor belts, and these are the only two corpses in this system. One seems to have passed through, but the other is clogging everything here. No wonder we find blood on the belt. So wait a minute, was someone in the process of murdering a person or disposing of a body when the bombs dropped? How do we explain this? I suppose it could have happened after the war. But that's it for the publishing floor. So heading back to the hallway, we can continue to the west. We can loot the corpses of the ghouls. Turning a corner, we see a supply closet with nothing inside. So continuing west, we can pass more pitching machines and head up the stairs to the Foreman's office. Here we find the door unlocked because we unlocked it from that terminal. And lying on the ground are chunks of the guy we killed, Mad Johnny Wes. We don't know anything about this guy from the game itself, but the Fallout 3 official strategy guide writes a bit of a profile about him. Mad Johnny Wes took refuge here in Hubris Comics because he was pursued by super mutants. But the ghouls inside Hubris Comics pushed him all the way back here to the Foreman's room. The stress of the situation caused his mind to snap. He became hostile to everyone, which is why he attacked us on sight. He saw this Foreman's office as the Alamo and rigged the building with traps. Mad Johnny Wes may be named after Wes Johnson, a voice actor for Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Wes Johnson did the voice of Mr. Burke and Fox in Fallout 3, and in Fallout 4, he did the voice of the Silver Shroud and all Protectrons and Sentry Bots. We find a copy of Grelok the Barbarian on the ground here. Must have got knocked off of this desk during the kerfluffle. Also on the desk, we find a Nuka-Cola Quantum, 2 boxes of darts, and 3 ammo boxes next to the desk. On the desk, we find a terminal, and it's bloody. After unlocking it, we learn that it's just a turret control system. Since the turrets are destroyed, this is no use to us now. Above the ammo boxes, we find 3 first aid kits. And that's about it for the Foreman's office. And that's it for the publishing floor. We find no other way out of here. So leaving these machines to smoke, we can head back to the elevator. Back at Hubris Comics Publishing, I opened the local map because I didn't exactly know where to go. And I discovered that there was a section off to the southwest that I failed to explore properly. That's right. We need to find out what's on the other side of this blockage. There's a hallway back there, but both of these openings have been blocked up with furniture. Well, to figure out how to get there, we retrace our steps and head all the way towards beta testing. Remember, there was that hallway leading to an exit to the west that we passed by. Heading down the hallway, we go through a door to find another hallway going to the west. And here we find a booby-trapped baby carriage. After disarming the trap, we can continue west. Sure enough, there's all of that furniture and junk blocking the openings. We find a rigged shotgun on a chair, and after disarming it, we accidentally tripped the tripwire. Oh well, at least we got rid of it. We see, however, that somebody triggered it. There's blood spatter all over the floor and the wall, and a skeleton shoved in the corner. Though I wonder who it was that rearmed the shotgun after it triggered. Perhaps it was Mad Johnny West. Opening the door leads to the entrance of Hubris Comics. We see the Hubris Comics sign on the wall and a receptionist desk in the middle of this room. Here we find a booby-trapped terminal. We can access the rear panel to defuse it, and right above it, a copy of Tales of a Junktown Jerky Vendor. On the receptionist desk, we find the Hubris Comics receptionist terminal. And this terminal has all of the same entries we read in that walled-off nook, with the addition of one extra one: beta testing notice. Mrs. Granier, beginning Monday, members of the Groganax Little Heathens fan club will begin visiting the offices to participate in beta testing our Reign of Grelok software. Participants must fill out our participation agreement and should be directed to their testing station 15 minutes prior to their scheduled appointment time. Just follow the main hallway all the way to the end and go through the door on your right. From there, the beta testing area is just down the smaller hallway to your right. Rebecca, a personal note. Some members of the fan club may be a little exuberant. We realize that you are not a babysitter and appreciate the extra trouble you'll be going to this week. This beta test is very important to getting our Hubris software venture off to a good start, so please do your best to keep things under control out front. You will be compensated at time and a half for the week as a token of our gratitude for your trouble. Wow, a pre-war company that treated their employees right. That's a shocker. Backing out of the terminal, we see two doors, one to the east and one to the west. Heading east first, we open the door to reveal a stairway that leads us down to a door bringing us to the Hubris Comics utility tunnels. So had we gone through the first door we found in the utility tunnels, it would have led us right to the entrance. Well, at least now we know where this goes. Heading back inside, we can cross the foyer to the opposite end where we find another bathroom and another toilet with an electric booby trap. I wanted to see exactly what happened if we tried to drink this water. Oh, ouch. So that's what happens. Well, now we can disarm it. And that's it for Hubris Comics. To leave, we can head towards the front doors to the south, turn around for one last look at Hubris Comics, and head out the door. We arrive outside and see a big statue off to the east. Turning around, we can look up to see the exterior of this building. And look at that, Hubris Comics. Man, everything is so monolithic and intimidating in the Fallout universe. We see that we're near a street called Dexter, and there's a metro station nearby, but before we can explore...
Hey! Where? How
Oh no! We stepped out into the open overlooking a flooded garden filled with super mutants. A great opportunity to put our Gauss rifle to work.
you like that? I'm hit! What's the matter, huh? Can't stand the sight of your own
I love this rifle. With the mutants dead, we can begin to explore. We find a Pulowski preservation shelter here, and inside we find a copy of Dean's Electronics and a whole bunch of scrap. Nearby, we find the Falls Church Mason District Metro. The area where we are now is Mason District. We don't have time to explore the metro today, but we'll get to it eventually. We saw that the super mutants had a captive in the middle of the garden. We'd better go set her free. Heading down a ramp, we can turn around to see this awesome statue again. Man, I love the statues in the Fallout universe. On the ground floor of the garden, we find toxic barrels all over the place. And another mutant.
Aha! There you are! What's the matter? Can't stand the sight of your own
Was this public garden a toxic waste dumping ground? Heading to the middle of the garden, we find a captive on her knees. The super mutants have bound the captive for transportation. The ropes are digging into her wrists. She's obviously suffering from their abuse. We could leave her to her fate, but on this good karma character, I'm gonna untie her.
Thank you. Whoever you are, thank you. The things they talked about doing to me. Look, I don't have anything to offer you except these supplies. I don't know why they didn't take it.
No, you'll need it more than I will. Take it.
You'd know best, wouldn't you? I have to go. Again, thank you.
With that, she runs off to collide with the shopping carts and then run into a barrel. But then she finally figures it out. Looks like the mutants have been here for quite some time, and they've kidnapped a lot of people, though most of their victims haven't made it. Perhaps the mutants got hungry. We can open one of these shopping cart cages to let one of the skeletons out. Oh. There's not much here in Mason District. It's mostly this big open garden. Aside from the super mutants, of note we find one building to the south. Just outside it we find a bit of an eating area. I think the mutants may have chased off whomever was using this, possibly raiders. We find Jet out here and some Nuka-Cola, some Buff Out and Psycho, and Mentats in a box behind the shelf. And then heading back towards the building, we find a door. Heading to the back of the building, we see a doorway that leads to an alleyway leading back to the road. But going back inside, we can climb some stairs to the second floor. Here we find a skeleton lying on the floor. He was a sniper, and he was clearly killed by gunfire while sniping from this window. We can unlock an ammunition box to loot some ammo. We find a copy of Guns and Bullets on this table next to a stim pack and 2 frag grenades. And we find 2 ammunition boxes. Heading back outside, we see that this building was on the corner of Dexter Avenue and Jarndyce Way. Heading south down Jarndyce Way, we find the final few remaining super mutants.
Yeah!
Heading inside the ruins of that building where we killed the super mutant, we can climb all the way to the top where we find a few ammunition canisters. Back down on the ground, we can follow Jarndyce Way south until it converges again with Dexter Avenue. Here we discover the Mason District South Metro Tunnel, right on the intersection between Dexter and Andrew Avenue. Near to this metro, we find some toxic barrels and a whole bunch of rad roaches. Mason District South leads to the flooded metro, a fascinating labyrinth that we will have to explore at another time. Behind the flooded metro, we find a box with some Mentats inside, and turning east down Andrew Avenue, we can follow the road, which winds all the way back towards the garden. Here we find a fenced-off parking lot, and inside, near to a bunch of wrecked cars, we find a box with 2 vials of Rad-X inside, and a bunch of scrap. And with that, we've fully explored Hubris Comics, the Hubris Comics utility tunnels, and Mason District. We'll have to explore the flooded metro and the Falls Church Mason District metro in another episode. I publish many Fallout videos each and every week here on my channel, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I have a shirt shop with completely unique designs that you can't find anywhere else. My designs come on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. My designs come on other products as well, including smartphone cases, mugs, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with more new videos.